Welcome to Faithful Discourse, a podcast of conversations at the intersection of religious faith and public life. I'm Chris Henry, your host, and my guest today is Ryan Burge, political scientist, data analyst, and former pastor. He's the author of The Nuns, The Great De-Churching, and his newest book here, The Vanishing Church. His work has appeared in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and on 60 Minutes. He is, by most accounts, the best data scientist in the country when it comes to faith and religion in the United States. Here's what I want to start with. Ryan isn't just the guy with the charts and the numbers. He's the guy whose church closed. And there's a difference I've found between knowing the data and living with it. Ryan Burge, welcome to Faithful Discourse.
I'm so happy to be here.
Well, we're grateful to have you and look forward to the conversation. I want to start, you've described your 17 years of pastoral ministry as, quote, an abject failure by traditional metrics. 9 people at the end. Tell me what the last Sunday was like.
The last Sunday it felt like a funeral in many ways. We invited as many people to come, former members who had moved away, their families. And so it was weird because it didn't feel like a normal Sunday for us, which was 10 people. There were 75 people there. And so by the nature of that thing, it felt different. Yes. But then also we had a catered meal afterwards, which was not typical at all for us. We actually were being very frugal with our money. We would, bring our own potluck as opposed to paying for catering. So that felt weird too, to bring food in. Yeah. And it just, the finality of it all was almost more than I could bear, to be honest with you. I have 2 recordings of my last sermon. The live recording is an absolute disaster because I was crying. Yeah. Multiple times, I couldn't get through certain parts of it. I actually skipped certain parts. I never preach out of a manuscript. I always just sort of have some light notes and just kind of go. And that was a complete manuscript because I knew it was almost like, and you know what's funny, thinking about that now, the only time I actually do manuscript preaching is when I did a funeral. And it seems, I didn't make that connection until just now, it felt like a funeral. And so I wanted to say what I wanted to say in the way I wanted to say it and thank the congregation for what they were. And also sort of exhort us to, just because the church closes doesn't mean we're done. And that's true. But I couldn't get through most of it. So I recorded another version later on that day, in my house. So I would have the actual, right audio. Right. But man, it's a day I'll never forget, for good and for ill. And I remember walking out of the door that very last day thinking this is probably the last time I'm ever going to be a pastor, probably the last time I'm ever going to walk out of this church, and probably the last time I'm going to see some of these people alive. And that's hard to take. Yeah. It still is hard to take, to think about it even today. Yeah.
I think one of the things to me that's so moving about the book, you've described it as your most personal book, The Vanishing Church, and the numbers and the facts and the figures are all there. They're all over your Substack, Graphs About Religion, and we know that. We read about it, we see it, we hear it, but those of us who are living in the church and with the church have an entirely different perspective, and that comes through even in your Substack, but particularly in the book. You continue to be a faithful church attender. You continue to be a part of a religious community. Describe what keeps you coming back and being in the pew on a Sunday morning.
Immense guilt. Is that the right answer?
Yeah, that's right. That's good.
Yeah, that's the one that fits the best. I would say guilt is part of it. Yeah. But the thing is, we always talk about guilt in a negative way. You know what I mean? Oh, religion makes you feel guilty for stuff. But maybe we should feel guilty for stuff sometimes. And I'm doing it because I know the data tells me that it's good for me. If I wrote this big book about the value of going to church and all the things we learn from going to church and why, and then I didn't go, it's like a doctor telling you to stop smoking and then go smokes out back, after you're why would you listen to that person? Right. So I guess I just want to be a person of integrity. And if I believe these principles matter and these ways of living matter, I've got to do the hard thing and sort of make that happen in my own life. And really the thing that motivated the book more than anything else was that question at the end of the introduction, which is like, my church is going to close, man. And like, what am I going to do when that happens? Where am I going to go? What kind of, because I've been Baptist my entire life, but there's not a Baptist church in my town I really want to go to. But like, I don't want to go, it's like, oh, I don't know anyone in this church, but I think I want to go to that church. And then this pastor invited me to go to his church. You know what I mean? So it was like a lot of finding a place that I did not hate. I knew I was never going to find a place that I was just happy with everything. But I think that's part of what the book's about though too, right? Is finding a good enough church. And, one of my friends invited me to go to church and I went with them one Sunday and then I've gone by myself after that. I sit in the back corner and the side by myself. I'm usually one of the last people to get there. I'm one of the first people to leave, but I'm showing up. And I do believe there's just a value in just, and sometimes I go, and I tell people this, sometimes I go and I feel nothing. You know what I mean? Like I preach, sometimes I preach and I felt nothing. Like I was like, okay, glad church is over. Now I can go on with the rest of my life. Like you don't have to get something out of it every time for it to matter to you. And sometimes I'll just say the Jesus prayer over and over in my head during church as a way to like sort of quiet my mind and calm my spirit. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes the sermon, matters and resonates with me. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes my mind's in 5 different places at once. Sometimes it's not. But like, I think just physically putting my body in that space is saying, okay, God, I'm giving you an hour. I'm giving you an hour of my life and I might get nothing out of it. And most of the time it means nothing, but every once in a while it means everything. And the everything makes the nothing worth showing up for as much as I can.
I have a friend who's a pastor in Charlotte, and she said that one Sunday, a member of the congregation came out after the service and said, I got absolutely nothing out of that worship service. And my friend said, well, that's okay. We weren't worshiping you. Sundays are like that.
I mean, but I think the routine is in many ways salvific, though. You know what I mean? It's like whenever you say the words like the creed together, sometimes you're just like saying the words because that's what you say. And then every once in a while, like something in your heart just like opens up in a way that you've never felt before. And you can like feel the sense of togetherness again. It's like, okay, that 5 seconds of epiphany is worth that 60 minutes of drudgery or whatever you want to call it. But I think you have to put yourself in the situation. Like I remember like while watching U2, they won a Grammy and they were talking about inspiration, right? Like where the inspiration comes from some of their great songs. And they go, here's what we do. We get in the studio, we tune our guitars, we get our instruments ready, and we wait for God to walk through the room. And I feel like that's what church is sometimes. It's like we get our clothes on, we drive to the church, we sit in the pew, and then sometimes when we wait for God to walk in the room. And you know what? Sometimes he chooses not to for reasons that we'll never understand. But then every once in a while, you get a hit song or you get that worship service that literally changes your perspective on your wife or your kids or your vocation or whatever it is. And that one moment is what, how many times does the average person create space like that for something transformational to happen to them? And I think that's one thing that church does is it gives me 1 hour, just 1 hour a week to say, okay, I'm open to whatever happens in this hour for my life to be changed. And it doesn't have to be this dramatic, like movie star, like, ooh, dramatic, moment. It can be something so subtle as just you met someone or you had a conversation with someone or, one word of a prayer hits you in a different way. And that's what carries you through the rest of that week. I would not know how to do my life without that possibility of transcendence because I get it nowhere else. And for me, that's what makes it worth it for me.
But of course, fewer and fewer people are making the choice to put themselves in that place where they might meet transcendence. And one of the reasons we know that is because you keep telling us that persistently and regularly. And so I want you to give us the headline. Someone says, Ryan, how bad is it really? What's the number you lead with to explain what's happening in the religious landscape of our country?
Yeah, so a number that is not even published yet, that's coming in a piece in late April, is baby boomers have been the most. If you went to church on Sunday in 1978, you were more likely to sit next to a baby boomer than any generation. And if you go to church in 2026, you're more likely to sit next to a baby boomer versus any other generation. That's like, let's be clear about what's happening with the age piece of this whole thing. Like I wrote a piece that got a lot of play about how like when's half your congregation going to be dead? And I basically said the boomers are propping up American religion. And the pushback I got was, well, isn't this just like generational replacement? Doesn't this happen like often? Hasn't the church sort of like, overcome this in the past? Not like this. I want to make it exceedingly clear that boomers have dominated American religion for like over 40 years now. And that's never happened in the history of our country because there was just a lot of boomers, like in a way that we've never seen before and we'll never see since. Right. And they were actually fairly religious. Right. And so the next generations there's not as many of them numerically speaking, and they're not as devout. So like, I even do this math problem, like what percentage of millennials would need to go to church just to offset the weekly attending boomers? The answer is 48% would have to attend weekly. And the number right now is 21%. And actually, what's funny about that is part of the reason is because millennials go to church less than boomers do, but the other part of it is there's just not as many millennials as there are boomers. Right. So that's the number that we all need to have like in the back of our heads all the time is like attendance is down, but it's going to go down like it's going to slide very quickly in the next 10 or 15 years because boomers are the reason attendance has not dropped faster and they're not going to be around in 10 or 15, 20 years.
One of the things you're writing and sharing that I don't hear anywhere else right now is that I think we've all sort of, certainly over the course of my lifetime, we've all gotten used to sort of that gentle downward slope, especially in mainline Protestantism. What I don't hear anyone else talking about is what you're describing as sort of a wholesale collapse.
Yes.
That a day is coming and not a single day on the calendar, but a relatively compressed length of time you're talking about where we will see not sort of that gentle slope of decline, but a really dramatic collapse.
And no one's ready for it. Like no one's planning for that. Like we're incrementally declining, which is what we've experienced, right? For the mainline's experiencing this for 75 years. So it's like, oh, we're going to be down 1% next year. Big deal. We're going to be down 2% next year. Big deal. But what happens if you're down 8% in 3 years or 10% in 5? Like that level of decline has never been, even attempted, like in terms of like thinking about how to pay for buildings, how to keep denominational offices running, how to staff, how many staff do you have? All these questions we don't have. There's no playbook for how to do this. And a lot of millennials like us are going to be faced with these churches that have all these structural problems in terms of, facilities and staffing and programs that are going to have to be cut, dramatically in a very short window of time. And we don't know how to do that in a way that's not catastrophic. The bigger worry that I have is not just that happening, it's the PR that comes out of that is going to be even worse, which is like, church is closed, church is closed, church is closed. This denomination's merging with this denomination. Like this one grand church is on its last legs kind of thing. That's going to happen in such a way that it's actually going to make the whole spin feel even worse because the narrative is going to drive like, oh man, American religion is collapsing right now because it will be. So that actually that's what creates sort of that death spiral, even more than the numbers. It's the perception of the number. It's like college. If word gets out that a college is like losing enrollment, guess what's going to happen? It's going to lose more enrollment because people don't trust it's going to be around anymore. Right. Like that's kind of what's happening in American Christianity right now.
It reminds me of the line about how do you go bankrupt? Very slowly and then all at once. It feels a little bit like that's what you're describing in kind of the religious landscape. I also, particularly in thinking about this aging cohort and the generational transformation that will have to happen, I think about the reason churches close their doors. And you mentioned in a conversation earlier that running out of money really is the number one reason. I find that often buildings eat churches, that over time the upkeep of a building becomes more than what. But these are also issues of spiraling, or issues that spiral when it comes to generational shifts, because most congregations are propped up financially by that aging cohort. And so I'm not sure enough work has been done on sort of how the generosity gap between the boomers and the millennials and then Gen Z is also going to sort of compound this issue. And
it's not just financial generosity. It's also like, oh, you know what? I'm a plumber and the church needs has a toilet that's leaking, I'll just go fix it. Like, you don't like the in-kind gifts. I think once if your church is big, not only do you have money, like financial gifts, you also have in-kind gifts and expertise. Oh, you don't need to hire an attorney because you got an attorney who's willing to look over the documents, or a real estate or insurance or whatever it is. When you get smaller, the money goes down, obviously, right? But also that expertise goes away. So now you have to start hiring all those things out, which costs 10 times more. And so like here's what I tell people: whether your building has 300 people in it or 30 people in it, the light bill is pretty much the same. The insurance is pretty much the same. Like the maintenance and upkeep doesn't change that much. And going from 100 to 1,000 people, that becomes sort of that's the albatross that hangs around a lot of these churches' necks. Is they built that church to be 350, 400 people on a Sunday. And when it's 100 people, first of all, it feels bad because you all this empty space. But like the financial burden of carrying all those rooms and the bathrooms and the plumbing and the HVAC, like that's what ends up like dragging a lot of these churches down. And I've been telling people think I'm crazy when I say this. I go, when you build a church, you build it for like, okay, we're 800 now, we're going to be 1,200 in 5 years. What happens if you're 330 years? Like what are you doing now that's going to make that building more of a drag on finances if that congregation shrinks? No one thinks about that when they're building a new building, by the way. They only think about, well, what happens when we fill this sanctuary up or that classroom up? But if you want to give a gift to your grandchildren, that is the gift you give them. Is we thought both directions, right? Like, what if we get bigger and what if we get smaller? Because the building that we were in was actually, it's 14,400 square feet, which is a pretty decent sized building for 300 people or so. When they were going to build the church, it was actually going to be a 2-story building of 25,000 square feet, but there was a church split during the fundraising process. So they cut the goal and cut the building in half. We would have died 10 or 15 years earlier. So like that's the thing that no one would have thought about in 1962, but it saved us in 2012 because we didn't have a second story to kind of take care of. So these are the things I think people need to be thinking of when they're thinking about buildings and finances and things like that. Yeah, we all are going to grow. The growth is just inevitable. Guess what? It's not inevitable. Right now you might be growing, but who knows if you have a scandal or a population shift or just some cultural shift that means that your church is going to be half the size. Does your building work as well at half the size or double the size? That's the kind of conversations I don't think anyone having.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about how we got here. And one of the ways you got here, your early work that really put you on the map was around the nuns, this group of sort of religiously unaffiliated or nothing in particulars. And you've written and said something that I think explodes one of the myths around that group of people. I think the assumption has been that the nuns are synonymous with this spiritual but not religious crowd. You write that the nuns aren't replacing religion with spirituality. You, I think by now famously have written, they're replacing it with nothing. Nothing. Yeah. So what does nothing look like, and how is it impacting the nuns' lives?
Why are you asking me a philosophical question, Chris? What does nothing mean? It means nothing. So
tell me about nothing.
Yeah, tell me about nothing. What does that mean? So there's this whole discourse, like you hear it, and it's been written about, like, okay, it's just an evolution, right? It's, okay, they're getting rid of traditional religion, they're remixing religion, they're starting something new, and you got Soul Cycle and, and CrossFit and yoga and meditation and all that stuff. And that is a theory that feels good. Like it feels right, but it is not empirically right. Yeah. So we did a survey. Templeton Foundation gave us a grant to do a survey to 12,000 non-religious Americans, and we asked them all kinds of questions, basically to start understanding the nuns for what they are. And one of the questions was, how important is spirituality to you? From not at all to very important. And then we asked how important was religion with you? Obviously, they said religion is not important. But what's funny in the spirituality question is 25% of non-religious people said spirituality is very important, and 25% said it was not important at all. Among religious people, 62% said spirituality is very important, and 12% said not at all. So, religious people are more spiritual. Those two things run on the same empirical tracks of each other. So, as one goes up, the other goes up, and if one goes down, the other goes down. The idea that there's this this huge well of people in America who are very spiritual but not at all religious is just demonstrably false. That's not what the data says. And then we ask them a follow-up question, which is like, okay, here's like 8 activities. Which ones of these have you done in the last 30 days? Meditation, yoga, tarot, crystals, like saging your house. Like we try to come up with all like the woo-woo new age stuff. And we did not find a single activity that was done more by non-religious people than religious people of all that new age stuff too. So like no matter how you cut it, how you slice it, they're not, I think a lot of people are aspirationally spiritual because they don't want to seem like they're vacuous. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I'm very, like, are you religious? No. Are you spiritual? No. Like we're like, wait a minute, like what's wrong with you? They'll say they're spiritual, but the reality is they're not that spiritual. And so I think that's like, this is why I love my job, because it's not my job to think like philosophically or theologically about these problems, but like they're not religious, they're not spiritual, and they're living their lives. So what does that mean? And if you ask them questions of meaning and purpose and stuff, they don't score that much worse than religious people do on like, I feel like my life has value and meaning and all this kind of stuff. So, you put that all together and you go, man, like I was taught in church, like, no Jesus, no peace, no Jesus, no peace. You know what I mean? Like without this, your life is going to be like meaningless. The data says something otherwise. There's lots of people who don't do these things and seem like they're doing okay. So either they're deluding themselves, like potentially, or you really don't need these things to live a fulfilled life. And maybe that's the reality we live in. And we don't want to face that reality because it creates all kinds of secondary questions that we are not willing or capable of answering with what we've got right now.
Yeah. Well, at the same time, we're experiencing sort of the hollowing out of the theology at the heart of some of the religiosity that's been important for decades and decades, if not centuries. I found this data point kind of devastating. You write that 40% of self-reported evangelicals in 2022 agreed that Jesus was a great moral teacher, but not divine. What is the meaning of evangelical if not that Jesus is divine?
Which is funny because their definition of evangelical, that's the Ligonier Institute, which is a pretty, conservative. Like their definition of evangelical is pretty strict. Like it's not just like, do you self-identify? It's like, you got to meet certain criteria.
Things,
And even a majority of those people, the thing is, and this is a point I cannot drive home enough is that preachers think that people in the pews have a very cogent, defined, thoughtful theology, when for most people, it's not any of those things. It's sort of like practical and, it bends toward, pragmatic, it's not like they don't see clear black and white. You can nudge people on certain issues depending on how you ask the question. And the thing is, the people online who talk about this stuff are the most strident, black and white, certain, this is what I believe, this is what's right, this is what's wrong. And then the average Christian is nowhere close to that. And I think that this is the thing that I wish I could articulate better is a lot of those strident, certain people yell at those other people for not being strident and certain. Like if I yell at you enough about why, like you should feel bad for not believing more, then you're going to believe more is the most nonsensical thing I've heard in a long time. And I think that to me is like, I don't understand the mentality of why don't you believe what the Bible says? Like that's going to get them to go, oh, you know what? I was wrong the whole time.
Right.
Now I believe exactly, all these things. Like that's what I struggle with so much among like, I don't want to use the word fundamentalist, but people who tend like towards fundamentalism, like they look at you like you're an absolute idiot and morally inferior if you have a sort of doubting kind of belief where you struggle with these things and you can't really affirm this thing sometimes. Like they think there's something like mentally defective with you. Like as that's going to bring you towards their position. Like you can't argue your way for these, like as a person who is in the middle, right? And is like a doubt-filled believer, as the Rachel Holt Evans phrase would be, right? You can't shame me into being certain about these things. So why are you, and if anything, it actually makes me go the other direction. That's what I really, really struggle with recently is like, these people are really bad at strategy and PR. Like they're convincing no one to move toward their side. And if anything, they're actually being counterproductive, I think, for a lot of people and pushing them the other direction, but they don't know anything else.
Yeah.
Like the pro-life movement is so interesting to me because they act like their argument is so incredibly self-evident. Like, of course that's a human being. Of course that's murder. But the more they say it, the fewer people believe they're right. Because the views of abortion have actually moved toward the choice side the last 50 or 60 years. So if your argument is so compelling and so self-evident, then why are you so bad at making it?
It reminds me of something I like to repeat to our sons all the time, which is never in the history of calming down has anyone calmed down by being told to calm down. You just keep telling someone, calm down, calm down, calm down.
And you say it louder, that'll make them calm down. Like that's like we had a, whenever like there's like a disagreement in our home and someone raises their voice, the thing we always say is we don't yell in this house because yelling achieves nothing. Like what does yelling do? Like if I say my opinion louder, it's going to convince you that I'm right.
Yes.
Like that's how our I think we've got to be more rational and logical about how we go about these things and less emotional about the whole thing. Because listen, I think we can all admit that a faith in Jesus Christ is not just head knowledge. And it's not just heart knowledge either. Like a faith that gives you both is a faith that's sustainable over the long term. And I think the problem is a lot of faith traditions in America are a whole lot of one and not enough of the other. And yet I think a lot of people need both in equal measure, and they're not getting both in equal measure. So we should not be shocked that very few people hold to a quote unquote orthodox view of Christianity or Jesus or whatever it is, because they're not getting both in equal measure. And I also think that there's just something fundamental about us that a lot of people like just embrace uncertainty and cannot think black and white about the world. So what do we do with that? You know, as people who, I'm the way, the truth, and the life, right? Like no one comes to the Father but through me. A lot of people go, I want to believe that, but I'm not there. What do we do with that? Like what's the next step there? And I don't think people have thought about that very well. And at least the approach they're using, I think, is not even, I wouldn't even say unsuccessful. I think it's actually counterproductive.
Well, I think what you do that helps sort of complexify the data is more complex than black and white, but even more so, the stories of the lives of the people behind the data are more complex, and that's where the difference between a preacher and a pastor. As a pastor, you're in relationship with the people that you are proclaiming the word of God to, and you understand what you have just described, which is that no one comes in as a litmus test conservative or a litmus test progressive. I always say at a place like the one that I serve, there is someone in the pew more progressive or liberal than you are, and there is someone in the pew more conservative than you are. And that's true almost regardless of where you are across the spectrum. But you do say, and are right with great concern about, the fact that is increasingly rare in our country. Places, particularly faith communities, where people of different ideological perspectives are regularly in community with each other. What are some data points or statistics that bear that out? Yeah,
so, I mean, if you're a white Christian, in the 1970s, you were a white Christian, you were probably a Democrat, especially if you're Catholic, but even evangelicals were majority Democrat in the early 1970s. The main line's always been majority Republican, but sort of, I call them country club Republicans, which is just like old George H.W. Bush Republicans. But, what's happened is that the white evangelical movement, we obviously know this, has become incredibly Republican, incredibly conservative, 80% plus vote for Donald Trump. But what people don't tell you is 75% of them voted for McCain. So they've been Republicans for a long time now. 80% voted for Reagan back in the 80s. So it's always been sort of a right-leaning movement. It's just seems like it's angrier now in ways that it wasn't 30 years ago. But the Catholic vote now white Catholic vote is now 2/3 Republican. The whole, even Hispanic Catholics have moved to the right over the last. So there's this thing that's happening where religion in America, Christianity, especially white Christianity, is sort of becoming more and more coded as Republican, like that alliance between the GOP and Christianity. And I think it's a mutually reinforcing cycle, by the way. I think the Republican Party has courted that, but I think evangelicals and a lot of Catholics have sort of leaned into that courting, like, oh yeah, I'm glad, oh yeah, reach out to us, I'll reach out to you, let's go. And so it's become like this flywheel that keeps spinning. And now a lot of churches, I think there are many churches in America that are 80% one party or the other party, and more likely Republican, 80% Republican. There's some that are 80% Democrat, but not that many. Just think about what that does, though, if you are in that 20% that's not the majority. Like, you're not going to speak up because why? Like, you're going to get shouted down. You probably get ostracized. We're going to whisper about you here, there, and everywhere. You might lose friends over it. Like, that's where we are in the discourse is if you have a minority opinion, even if it's a 1/3 minority opinion, you're not going to speak up because you think to yourself, what am I gaining and what am I losing? And I think that's the part that church has always been sort of good at is like, okay, we can talk about politics here because we agree on religion. And now we're losing that part too. Like, imagine just like trying to go to a local restaurant and say, hey, like walk to a guy at the bar, go, let's talk about politics. You're starting with nothing, no goodwill behind that. So church always had a lot of goodwill behind that. So it's like, okay, we can disagree on politics, but we still like each other. That's the part to me that's even more worrisome is when you don't have that sort of well of trust and respect for each other, then you try to debate politics with nothing to fall back on. Of course it's going to fail.
Right.
And so I think that's one of the reasons is we don't talk about it more is because what do we gain? What do we lose? And are we going to change anybody's mind?
Right.
And I think the answer is we're going to lose a lot. We're going to gain nothing. And we're probably not going to change anybody's mind. So the best thing to do is just cluster with our own friends over here, start group chats about how all these people are awful and really not move the ball forward. And all it does is just create animus and distrust and dislike of other people, which means it makes the whole thing harder down the road because you don't like those people.
Well, and you mentioned what it does to the 20% who feel ostracized and silent. I also worry about what it does to the 80%. Because it feels to me as if those sorts of communities tend to become more extreme, not less extreme. And the more pre-sorted we are, the more we just spend time patting each other on the back for how right we are and how wrong other people are. And quickly you turn from those people are misguided or mistaken to those people are evil and need to be destroyed.
That is, to me, like I always say, like I have a part in the book where I say, if you think that anyone who voted for Donald Trump's a racist, I was on a panel at Notre Dame not too long ago, and someone on the panel started off the whole panel by saying, if you vote for Donald Trump, you're a racist. And I'm like, okay, so you call a majority of Americans racist right off the jump. Boy, you know what really opens up dialogue? When you call me racist. You know, like I know lots of people vote for Donald Trump who race is not even part of the equation. The reason they vote, they want cheaper milk and cheaper. Now, whether they get it or not, that's a whole different story, right? But they thought they were going to get cheaper milk and cheaper eggs and cheaper bread. That's why they voted for Trump. They didn't think about race 2 bits when they went to the polling place. But then the other side is if you vote, the Democratic Party is demonic. It's anti-Christian. It's baby killers. It's like you're reducing all of this to if you vote for this person, you're a murderer, or if you vote for this person, you're a racist. Like, I don't think people fully realize a lot of people walk in the ballot box and go, man, I really don't like their position on X, but I've got to vote for them because of Y. Doesn't mean you agree with X. You know what I mean? Like that's the problem is we're stuck with binary choices. And the name calling is such a terrible way. And by the way, it's unchristian. Like, let's be real about this thing. Like Christianity teaches us that everyone has, worth and value. And if you reduce them to nothing more than a label, like racist or baby killer or whatever, communist or whatever it is, you're not seeing them as a 3-dimensional person, which is in essence a sin, And the problem is the loudest voices online are actually building huge followings and lots of money and lots of prestige by saying ridiculously caustic things and mislabeling the other side and creating us versus them. That is the problem, is the incentive structure that we live in right now is not towards debate and dialogue, not towards speaking up when you have a minority opinion. It's actually the opposite of that. It's in the 80% situation, like, can I out-liberal you or can I out-conservative you? Like, what have we lost when we do that? I think we've actually lost what normal is. Like, I just wish we could return to normal, common sense, middle of the road, pragmatic politics. Because guess what? Most Americans, that's exactly what they want out of their politicians. They're not getting it.
Yeah. A couple of years ago, I was a part of a clergy group that met monthly online, and it was actually Art Farnsley was the one who put it together, and it was pastors across the state of Indiana and diverse in every way he could make us diverse. So size of congregation, denomination, theological tradition, racial makeup of the congregation, rural and urban and suburban. And occasionally we would get divided divided into groups based on size of congregation. And so I was with a lot of pastors who serve kind of large community churches in small towns.
Okay.
So non-denominational evangelical churches. And what I found is across the board in our group, everyone was struggling with this same question, which is, why is it that I could utter all forms of heresy from the pulpit? Theologically, I could be way off base and I wouldn't hear a word. But if I say one thing that is coded political on one side or the other, that's the thing that I'm going to get feedback about. And you write that people in many ways are not coming to church to kind of get their politics challenged or formed by their theological tradition, but rather they're choosing their theological tradition or they're choosing the church they attend based on their political preferences.
Yeah, that to me that's honestly the most existential thing that I worry about is like, where does our foundation come from? Like, where does our sense of right and wrong come from? You know, the Christian ethic has so invaded Western culture. And I say invaded in the nicest way possible, by the way, that I think it's become so subconscious that we don't think about it anymore.
Right.
And I think that's the problem is we're not constantly reminded of like how Christianity has changed the way the West thinks about right and wrong and good and bad and evil and injustice. Like, and I think we need to sort of rediscover compared to what? That's a phrase I use all the time. Like it's 80% of this does this. Well, compared to what? What's the baseline? Like what's normal in this situation? Americans need to have a real compared to what moment, right? Where like, I think we read about North Korea and we're like, like we need to think what it would be like to be a North Korean versus an American and how their ethics are framed differently than our ethics. So for us to rediscover just how much Christianity, but I will say this. This is the failure, though, of Christianity to be more than just a cultural like backdrop, like a background hum in our lives. It needs to be more than that.
Yeah.
And I think that's the job of the preacher, right? Is to elevate that and say, let me show you why we think this way, where the ethic comes from, where the scriptural basis from this, we derive this from, so that way that people, they can hold a mirror up to themselves and go, I know why I think this way now because Jesus taught us this is the right way to live. Yeah. And then we can look around in America and go, man, like these ethics that we've been taught and these practices have developed the most beautiful, wonderful, safest, most prosperous society in the history of the world because maybe those values and ethics actually do work. Like, I think we need to rediscover that in a non-political way, a non-patriotic way, just in an understanding of your job as a pastor is to make invisible things visible to people. Like, and that's my job as a social scientist to say, I know that you feel these things, but let me show you what that actually is and what that looks like. I think there's such a humongous value in just doing that thing of surfacing things and saying, here's why this is. And I think that actually might be the goal of the church going forward, to say, where did these come from? Like, why do we think like this? And especially in the main line, by the way. There's a whole theory out there. The reason the main line collapsed is because everyone in America just adopted their values.
They won,
Yeah, they won. They lost because they won.
Yeah.
Maybe the main line should remind people of that over and over again. Is like the 20th and 21st century was successful in America because the main line taught you how to live your life, and now you've internalized that in such a way. So maybe that's the next step.
And maybe it's hard to be faithful to a Savior who was crucified when mainstream culture looks exactly like the life of the church. I said in a sermon recently that we've sort of created a throw pillow Jesus, where our faith is decorative and comfortable, but doesn't clash with the decor. I think that's mainline Protestantism in the U.S. for a long time fits in perfectly. And I think you're right, partially because we created the culture that then kind of reflects us. But I wonder if one of my professors, Stanley Hauerwas, used to always say it is the job of the theologian to make it hard to be a Christian and hard not to be a Christian. That sometimes we need to draw these dividing lines, not politically and certainly not in terms of partisan polarization, but between faithfulness and lack of faithfulness. And sometimes to be faithful looks like following the one who was crucified, not the one who was made king.
And that's the upside downness of that whole thing is hard for I think it's hard for Americans to grasp, right?
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
to me, the most countercultural thing in the entire gospel is the Lucan gospel narrative is the great reversal, right? So the last shall be first. That's all over the gospel of Luke. Like every story is like tied back to this narrative. And in the world where we are, by any definition, the first, not the last, to think about a kingdom where that is not a badge of honor, right? Like that is not something we should be boastful of, but actually is a tremendous burden that we have to bear both personally and, like internationally. Like, I don't think we think about it that much because it makes us uncomfortable. And I think that's the job, they always told the job of a preacher is to afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted. I think we need to comfort the afflicted a little bit more, but also we're pretty darn comfortable in America, like with the world we live in and the culture we have. Like, we need to understand that like we're coming from a very specific perspective, and then not everybody comes from our perspective, but what is our obligations and responsibilities to the world? They're bigger than what we could possibly even begin to imagine.
Yes. All right, I promised myself that we would move from diagnosis to cure, and I know this is where you get very uncomfortable as a data scientist. I listened not long ago to a podcast with Priya Parker, who wrote The Art of Gathering, and I found it really interesting. It was a secular podcast, but she said at one point, it feels as if we need to go back and recreate some of the things that we have torn apart. And she talked about religious faith communities specifically, that we are experiencing the loss of the things we said we didn't need. And so our generation and the generation that is coming after us is going to have to find answers to the lack of community, the lack of in-person gathering, the lack of sort of cross-pollination that happens when people who disagree spend time together in respectful ways. Talk a little bit about how you see the church as offering something that no one else, or at least very few other places, can offer.
I mean, think about how many social organizations still exist in America in large numbers. I mean, the Elks, the Moose, the VFW, the Legion, the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, the bowling leagues, everything Putnam talked about, was already declining in the post-war period. There's nothing in America socially that's making a comeback right now. Like every organization's in decline. And when Putnam was writing, the church was still doing okay because it was 25 years ago. It's doing less okay now. But the thing is, there's so much capacity in the church to create that social gathering place that, I mean, I have a friend who struggled with depression his entire life. And, it's we talk about it every once in a while. And I got tired of talking about it with him because, like, how can you talk? I can't talk him through what he's struggling. I'm not trained that way. I don't understand it because my brain doesn't work that way. So it was frustrating for me. And then he called me up about a year ago and goes, Ryan, I'm going to tell you something I've learned the hard way in my life. There's one way for me to beat my depression, which is to leave the house as much as I possibly can, even if I don't want to. And I thought that was so profound in such a basic, guttural way, right? Of like, we need more excuses to leave the house. And guess what? That's what church is at some level, is an excuse just to get out of your house and go do something else. Like, for me, like, my career is very socially isolated. I don't think people fully realize like what my day-to-day is like. Many days it's me at home. My wife's home sometimes she's not, but she's doing her thing. I'm doing my thing. We talk for like during lunch, maybe a little bit here and there, but like I'm in my office just pecking away, making graphs and writing and stuff. Like, I'm by myself most of the day. Like, I need an excuse to go. Like, you want to go to dinner? Yeah, absolutely. I want to go to dinner. You want to go to church? Absolutely. I'll go to church. Like, for me, like, it's, if I know that's what makes my spirits lift, I've got to go do that thing. And I think hopefully a lot of people they are having that sense of like, I need to be more social. Like, I need to get out there in the world. And they'll see like, okay, what do we have? What are our options? And the options are basically, go to church. Like, that's really the option that exists. And I think a lot of the problem is it's you go first. You know what I mean? Like, you go first. No, like, I'm lonely. I should go to church. Well, if I go, I'll be the weirdo sitting in the back by myself. Like, no, well, you go first. And if we all went at the same time, it would sort of like jump over the you go first problem. And we'd all sit around and go, man, this is kind of cool, right? Like, we're all sitting around and then after church, we can do? We can go to lunch or we can set up a time to go, like hang out later on or whatever. Like, that's the magic. That's the magic of churches. Those, like, that's why, like, I think like the work from home thing failed is because the serendipity went away. Just walking in the hallway, you see a coworker, hey, what project you working on? Oh, this, and you come up with an idea, and then you start working on the idea, and it ends up being a thing. Like, you don't get that in an online environment. Like, that is like the beauty of church for me. Is some of the best conversations I've ever had were not planned at all. Bumped into someone, started talking, 20 minutes later, still talking, then friendship builds. So I hope that people will hear this, listen to this, read the book, and realize, like, I need to have more of those sort of serendipitous, like, unplanned moments of interaction. Actually, there's a whole report about, like, there was a whole study on, like, what makes people happy, and those little, like, micro moments of interaction, a constant barrage of those is actually what makes us happier over the long term. Maybe not necessarily the planned socializations, but the unplanned socialization makes us happier. And guess what? Showing up, that's exactly what showing up's all about. It's like showing up and letting things happen. It's really that basic.
I think a lot of us are more like my 12-year-old son than we'd like to admit. When we ask our 12-year-old son or tell him that we're going to church, he always says, is Elsie going to be there? I think all of us have an Elsie. Is so-and-so going to be there? Okay, then I'd like to be there. I do think you're right that the building of community, when we came back after COVID and we're meeting in person again, the number of people who were emotionally overcome walking into the sanctuary because, and it was the beauty of the space and the sacredness of the space, but even more than that, it was being with the people they loved again. It's extraordinary to me to be a part of a community where I always like to say our church on Sunday mornings is the one place I'm in on any given week where every generation currently alive is under the same roof at the same time. And so you talk about the need for moderation in terms of people of different political perspectives and ideological perspectives. I think it's also true from generation to generation that I want my 12-year-old to know 90-year-olds, and I want the young adults in our congregation to know the 4 and 5-year-olds, because they're really, you talk about being bifurcated or isolated. That is particularly true across the generational cycles right now, that we have our old people in the old people places, and we have our kids in the kids places, and our young adults go to the places they go. So there's got to be something, I think, valuable about that intergenerational interaction as well.
So when my 14-year-old was probably 7, I'll never forget this moment. We were driving home from church, the two of us in the car, and he was sitting in the back seat in his car seat. And I remember him saying, "Dad, I wish church felt like it used to feel like when it was fuller, when more people were there." And I said, "Buddy, it's not." It goes, "Can I give some money to make it feel like that again?"
Wow.
And I was like, he's 7 and he gets it. You know what I mean? Like he missed it, like what it was. And I hurt for him because he didn't get to have that anymore. But I also out of the heart, the mouth speaks, right? And like that longing for community, even at 7 years old, he got it. And like inculcating that idea into him at that age, I think plants a seed in his mind and goes, that feeling, I want that feeling. Like, and I want it when I'm 7 and 17 and 77. Like, I want to feel that thing. Like whenever your people came back after COVID, and it's like, like the warmth, and like there's no feeling like going home, where you're just loved and you're just happy. People are happy to see you and you're happy to see them. There's nothing else on earth like that. When my congregation, like we had this situation where there was an older couple they would come every once in a while. And then one day they brought their grandson, and I'd never seen the kid before. And it's always weird to have someone younger in an older congregation. And so I did the service, whatever, and I said the prayer, and I did the benedict, or I did the invitational because we're Baptists and we do have to do invitationals, right? And he comes forward. And I was like, okay, this is unexpected. Like, we don't have people come forward during invitational time. And he whispered in my ear, he goes, "I am going to drug rehab this afternoon. And could you pray for me?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely, dude. Like, yes." And then, after the song was over, I looked at the congregation. I said, this is, what's his name? And he is struggling and he's going to rehab. And he wants us to pray for him. And everyone got up and laid their hands on this kid. And like, the feeling I had for that kid, I had two feelings at once. Like, this kid's got to feel more loved in this moment than he's felt in a long time.
Yes.
But man, I'm so proud of my congregation.
Yes.
Like, because I always taught them, like, we got to pray for the addicted, the isolated, the depressed, the lonely, the left out, the lost. Like, addiction is something that Jesus cares about, and we should care about too. And like, to see them operationalize that, right, and like make it change their behavior. No one stepped back and goes, he deserves what he gets. Like, why'd you take drugs the first time, dude? Like, no, they all knew in that moment that kid needed help. And the best thing that could help was just getting off their seats and pulling. How many times in our life do we get that? Like, any other context in your life, how many times do you get 30 people laying their hands on you and saying, I wish more than anything on earth at this very moment that you get well.
Yes.
Like, if we lose that, we lose so much of the beauty of humanity in just that moment. And like, that's what keeps me coming back to church, is just in those moments when you feel that thing where, like, just for that 1 second, you're all on one page and you're all pulling in one direction. Man, that is a transcendent, it's like the veil between heaven and earth gets thin. In that very moment, man. And you don't get that at basketball games or concerts or anything else. That is what sustains me in my darkest hour, is thinking about those moments. And if I left this, I would leave that. And I am not willing to leave that. Even if it happens never again in my life, the possibility that could happen again is all that I need to stick around.
That was your congregation's U2 moment, preparing the instruments and waiting in the recording studio.
Yeah, and then God walked through the room.
God showed up.
Yeah, God showed up.
It's a powerful story, and it can only happen in faith communities. I think you're right about that. I want to close with a brief lightning round. So these are fast answers.
Okay.
First thing that comes to mind.
Okay.
And we'll do a mix of some fun and some work.
Okay.
The American church in 2050.
Yeah.
Smaller and healthier, or just smaller?
Probably just smaller, to be honest with you. More ideologically pure, which I think is actually a problem. More theologically pure, which I also think is a problem in many ways. So smaller and probably angrier, honestly.
Thing you miss most about being a pastor?
Knowing how people are doing on a week-to-week basis, like seeing them physically, like, are they walking better today? Like, this person has cancer, like, where are they at in treatment? Is it working? Are they responding? And not just that person, but like their grandkids, like all the little stuff, like the little touches like that I just miss. I just miss living life with those people and just following their journeys that they followed my journey. There's no way to recreate that. And it's just frustrating to me.
The metric you wish church leaders would stop using?
Membership. Membership, we all know this. Every membership metric is terrible. There's no incentive for churches to actually clean the membership rolls up. Actually, there's an incentive to not clean the rolls up, because then if you kick someone off, they show up a year down the road, like, why did you kick me off? So membership, essentially, I love when I post membership data on social media, because it goes, oh, I know my denomination lies about that. I go, every denomination's bad at this. Like, it's just, it's, I don't want to say it's meaningless, but it's just what we call a very noisy indicator of what's really happening. And so I just think a move away from membership is you don't lose that much by getting away from membership. I think attendance, actually tracking attendance in a rigorous way, is so much more effective for all kinds of metrics. The health of a church is not based on membership; it's based on attendance, giving, vitality. It's all attendance, and yet we still use membership as sort of the end all be all.
Yeah, very true. You've recently mentioned gratitude as a spiritual discipline you're cultivating. What's one thing you're grateful for?
I'm grateful that I get to be alive. I know that sounds so basic. I'm just grateful that I'm alive at this moment with these people. Like, I tell people constantly, if I could be born at any point in the history of the world, it'd be right now. Like, the fact that God put me on the earth in the United States of America during a time of relative peace and prosperity. I can drive a car and be across the country in a day and a half. And the fuel doesn't cost hardly anything. If I get sick, there's almost certainly a treatment to make my life better. It's just, and I have data out the wazoo that I can analyze on a computer I bought at Walmart for $250. You know what I mean? Like, I could not have done this job if I was born 20 years earlier. That's what amazes me about, like, you got to hit the crease, right? You got to hit the window when it's open. And for whatever reason, God put me in where I am with the skills that I have, with the opportunities that I have. And like, how can you not be grateful for that? I get to do this work. I don't have to do this work. I get to do this work. Man, that's such an, you can be too much of a lot of things. You can't be too thankful, you know, and I'm really trying to, it's hard. It's hard to change your whole mentality, but man, just turning yourself toward gratitude 5% changes everything in your life.
Wow. Second to last question, as a St. Louis/Illinois guy.
Yeah.
Cubs, Cardinals, or neither one?
Oh, Cardinals till the day I die. Both my sons are Cardinal fans, as God intended. My wife is a Cubs fan. Her whole family are Cubs fans. My father-in-law had season tickets to see the Cubs for several years. I actually went with him to see Chris Bryant's first major league game at Wrigley Field. At one point, I was going to Wrigley more than I was going to Busch. But man, no, to the day I die, I'm Cardinal fans. And one of the greatest joys of my life is not that my kids were raised in the church, which is also great, but also they go to Busch Stadium and watch the Cardinals. Even though they're going to be bad this year, I would rather take that than me. The idea of being a Cubs fan is like, I can't even, it's like, I like become French.
Are you saying some things are black and white?
Oh my gosh, yes. In this case, there's no, and listen, I told my kids, I go, what my youngest son was like, I want to change teams. I like the Braves. I go, this is not how it works, son. You pick a team and then are mad the rest of your life. Like, that's how sports fandom works. So the fact they track the Cardinals, they watch videos about the Cardinals, they're talking to me about prospects. I'm like, this makes me almost as happy as anything else in my life, as my kids want to talk to me about AA Cardinals prospects right now. Like, let's go.
I pastored for a decade in Atlanta, and SEC football is very big in the Southeast. And I remember one time parents of a child in the congregation came to me and said, we're not going to have our kid go through confirmation because we really think they should have the chance to choose from any religion they might want to choose. Okay. And they're on their own path, and we don't want to overly tip the scales one way or the other. And we want them to discover their own religious faith. And I said, let me ask you a question. I said, you're a Georgia Bulldog fan, right? And they said, oh gosh, till the day we die, tried and true. And I said, if your kid came to you and said, I think I'm going to root for the Crimson Tide, would you say, well, you're choosing well, no, of course not, because they're raised to be a Georgia fan. I said, maybe you should think about what you just said.
Well, listen, football might be more important than your eternal salvation. Let's get real here, especially in the South.
It might be. Last question. So you've studied decline, you are studying decline, you've lived decline, you've written about decline, and yet you're also mapping strategies and hopes for the church in the years and decades to come. Within you, where does that hope come from?
I know how the story ends, and this ain't it. I have to believe the future is better than the past. I cannot operate from a position where the world is getting worse. Like, that is so antithetical to, I think, the gospel. Yes. This is, by the way, I'm going to point the inherent contradiction of evangelicalism out right now. Evangelicalism, a lot of evangelicals are dispensationalists, which dispensationalism is an idea of like eschatology of how the world's going to end. And it's predicated on the idea like the world's going down the tubes, and then that's going to lead to the rapture and all that stuff, right? But then they vote for candidates who say, I want to make America religious again. I want to make America great again. So do you want the world to go down the tubes, or do you not? Because if you do believe in your eschatology, you would vote for the candidate who says, I'm going to accelerate the end times. Like, that's the one that you should vote for. And yet the ones who get the most votes are the ones who say, let's bring America back to when we were more religious. I don't understand the contradiction. Someone needs to explain it to me. But my eschatology is not dispensationalism, right? I think the future is always better than the past. I think progress is not a straight line, but it points upward, like over time. You cannot tell me the world we live in today is worse than the world of like we can go back in our childhood, it was better than what these kids have nowadays. No. That is demonstrably empirically false. My little nephew was born with a congenital heart defect. His valves didn't close the right way when he was in the womb for whatever reason, right? One cell doesn't touch another cell, and he's 13 years old today and alive and going to school and loving his life because he had Gore-Tex put in his heart when he was 6 weeks old in a procedure they didn't even know how to do 20 years ago. Like, you look at that and tell me the world was better 20 years ago? Not for that kid, because that kid would have been dead 20 years ago. I completely, resoundingly reject the idea that we're getting worse in any way. Now, listen, again, progress is not a straight line. We go through, these unprecedented times we're living in right now. Like, stop that nonsense, okay? Like, my grandmother sent my grandfather off to fight in the war and didn't talk to him for 6 months. Like, no correspondence. And, oh, I'm sorry, your people are mean to you on TikTok today? Like, let's get real here, man. Like, the struggles we're facing are not good, but there's nothing that we're facing that we cannot overcome. Yeah. And I believe in the ability of human beings to solve our problems because all the evidence points to the fact that we have and we will. And I really do think that that my kids are inheriting a world that is better than I inherited, and my grandkids will inherit a world that's even better than that. How else would you get up how else would you get up in the morning and face your day? And you know what that drives for me though is if I believe the world's getting better, it's my job to help make it better, to drive the progress forward, to understand the world better, and to make it better for my kids and grandkids. Like, if you think the world's getting worse, then what's your motivation to even why? Like, why even try to make the world a better place? So I have to operate from the position of hope, because the alternative is bleak. It's existential despair. And I can't live that way. I wouldn't do the work I'm doing. I wouldn't live the life I'm living. I wouldn't be the father or the husband or the person that I am if I thought the world was going to be worse tomorrow than it is today. The world is a wonderful and beautiful place. Anyone who tells you that it's not, they're lying to you. Like, they're trying to sell you something that's just not true. So hope. Hope is the strangest of all things. But, there's this great quote that I love from Graham Greene. It says, "You can't conceive, nor can I, the appalling strangeness of the mercy of God." And I think about that every single day. Like, these are the mercies that he gives us, and they're strange and they're bizarre, and we can't conceive of them all the way, but man, what a gift we've been given.
Yes.
What a gift.
Yes. What a beautiful way to close. Ryan Burge, thank you for this conversation. The work you do matters, and not because the data is encouraging, but because I think seeing clearly is the beginning of responding faithfully, and you help us see clearly. So we're grateful for your honesty, for the scholarship that you are producing, and also for your humanity and your willingness to go beyond the charts. Thank you for being on Faithful Discourse today.
It's been an absolute pleasure, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And thank you all for watching and listening to another Faithful Discourse podcast. We hope you'll like, review, share, subscribe, and send us your comments as well as your suggestions for future guests. We'll see you next time on Faithful Discourse. And until then, take care of each other.